I mix what I like, what I like.
I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like, organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. That's healthy.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
You got to earn your liberation.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome back. Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here, live on what is still currently BPM. I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Welcome, good Monday morning to you. The semester's over, so I figured why not resume a few Monday mornings and hold us over till the remix starts back up tomorrow. Little Vivir Me Pocket remix, exclusive to this program. An exclusive mix of go-go and salsa, my two favorite pockets. Come on in, welcome everybody. Please do like, share, subscribe as you come on in. Peace. Oh, right on. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. What's up, John? What's up, James? Did you all get to see this Black Twitter docuseries? Just me for now. But who knows? You never know. Yeah, well, I hope I don't spoil it for you. Or maybe I do. All right, everybody. Again, welcome. Please do all the things, and thanks for coming through this morning. But what I'll do is I'll go through a few notes here, and then we can get to some other things if you have time. If I have time, we'll see how it goes. We can build a little bit more. But I did watch all three parts of the Black Twitter Hulu series, and I was trying to find, I had tweeted what was my top 5, and now I can't find where I put, I think I erased it in my notes, but I had put up a top 5 had created a top 5 Black capitalist argument checklist, and this one hit a couple of them. But a few were raised, by the way. Shout out to Dr. Dennis Winkler and the TNET crew in Baltimore that hosted me for discussion of buying power and black capitalism is psychological warfare. And we had a good discussion. Shout out to those who showed up, had a good discussion. Still am not able to convince everybody, but I've still also yet to see someone who has actually read my book, and even who hasn't, but who has an actual sort of credible criticism or response to it. So we're still waiting for that. But we got to still try to struggle with this idea that we need money to get free and that business is the way to do it, and to get actually people to look at the data and the way the economy works and the history of black capitalism, again, as propaganda. It's a struggle. So, but we'll keep at it. So I'll come back to that. I'll try to find that top 5. I don't know why I erased it, but here we have Black Twitter, this series, which is based on an initial, as they say, article from Wired magazine titled "A People's History of Black Twitter" by Jason Parham, who's the director of this series. And the first thing that I noted here, so let me just say, in fact, I'm sorry, I messed up. I messed up my own ordering here. Let me reset here for a quick second. Sorry about that, everybody. Because I want to just clarify what my initial thesis is about this particular series, so we can, So to me, the thesis for me is that this is another in an increasing barrage of documentaries and films which intend to replace actual political power, political struggle, radical movement building with presentation, symbolic reference, popularity, and bourgeois fantasies of inclusion and national influence. The political context of media, its function and maintenance of power, the actual material conditions of Black people, or the political economy of Blackness is all ignored in favor of allusions which create illusions of a power we are still lacking and looking for. So there's a lot of alluding symbolically to a strength and a power that Black people have that is never connected or made material. And so now I can bring in this Wired article that is said to be where this from July of 2021, which is said to be where all of this starts, this particular series at least. And the first thing I noted, of course, is that it takes that the phrase made popular by Howard Zinn in his book, A People's History of the United States, which I still think is a classic and should be read and reread. But it takes that and says A People's History of Black Twitter, from hashtag you are Black when to Black Lives Matter, how a loose online network became a pop culture juggernaut, an engine of social justice, and a lens into the future. But it does not do what is promised in the title. There's no overt, explicit, stated connection to Zinn's approach. But more equally, if not more important, is that there's no Zinn approach. That is a people's history of the United States and a people's history of Horace Campbell mentioned on Renee's show the other day, from Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, of indigenous people. These are people's histories speak to the original ethic or political point, that is to tell the history from the perspective of the people being oppressed, not only in history and in society, but in the historical narrative that is created to remove them. That was Zinn's point, to write a book about the history of the United States that puts all of the removed people, that challenges the great white. Remember, that was part of his point. We don't want to just tell the great white male story of U.S. history. We want to put in all these other groups and all these other perspectives. So that's the promise that we're given in this claim of a people's history of Black Twitter. But what we end up getting is the very same dominant narrative of media, of Blackness, of history, of the role of media, of the potential for social media in this case, or media or technology in general, to free us. So so that was the first thing that struck me in watching the series. And it doesn't, or even reading this article, it doesn't take long. So just a little bit from the article here. Near the end of 2009, during the twilight months of the decade that saw the first Black man elected to the U.S. presidency, Ashley Witherspoon was chasing virality on a young app called Twitter. As the personal assistant for the singer Adrienne Bailon, a former member of the pop groups 3LW and the Cheetah Girls, Witherspoon often worked on social media strategy. For weeks, she and Bailon had been testing out hashtags on both their feeds to see what would connect with fans. And then she started, You Know You're Black When. Here in all its melanated glory was Black Twitter. And what is this melanated glory? You know you're Black when. So it already is setting up what for me is a very limited approach. It's not telling so here it's saying by a people's history, we're going to tell the story of how Black people used Twitter and turned it into a pop cultural phenomenon. We're not going to talk about how, for instance, Twitter is itself born as a technology out of a militarized apparatus meant to suppress the radical aspirations of the people. And here are those people's stories. It's this fantasy that we keep getting that Black people from below can produce a cultural phenomenon that represents a power that should be political or politicized, but is not. So more than a decade later, Parham writes, Black Twitter has become the most dynamic subset, not only of Twitter, but the wider social internet. Right now properly, so forgive me. I'm not sure what just happened there. Let me just double check. All right, I think we're good. But then in an attempt to become political, they bring in this reference to Amiri Baraka. As they say, is the founder of the Black Arts Movement, which, all right, is already a little bit diminishing. But they mention his essay, Technology and Ethos, quoting him as saying, how do you communicate with the great masses of Black people? He asked, what is our spirit? What will it project? What machines will it produce? What will they achieve? For Black users today, Twitter is Baraka's prophetic machine, voice and community, power and empowerment. To use his words, it has become a space to imagine, to think, to construct, to energize. So I'm going to pause that there for a second, because that says a lot about the politics of the approach, because when, all right, I'll just have to share it from here. When you find and read or reread for some the essay, there's a couple of things that, dang, I thought I had the link for it better, a better version of it right there. I guess. Um, yeah, here's a better version. That's what I thought. Okay, sorry again. But when you look at the Technology and Ethos from 1970, from Amiri Baraka, there's a couple of points here that it doesn't, and I can put the link in the show description, because what it says from the beginning here is that machines, as Norbert Wiener said, are an extension of their inventor creators. That is not that is not simple once you think machines. That is not simple once you think machines. The entire technology of the West is just that, the technology of the West. And it's almost a McLuhan-esque type of argument, when it feels like that, at least, so that the telephone in one culture solution to the problem of sending words through space. It is political power that has allowed this technology to emerge and seem the sole direction for the result desired. A typewriter, why should it only make use of the tips of fingers that contains, or maybe it's an anti-McLuhan-esque argument, because as I understand, see, this was always my struggle with McLuhan, because Baraka is saying the technology of the West is being used to expand the West. Black people, through the adaptation of Western technology, must use that technology to produce art that challenges the world. And for Baraka's point, especially if we don't freeze him in this one essay in 1970, as is done by this Black Twitter approach, then we would be able to engage him through his more critical, evolving critical analysis, his materialism, his Marxism, and then, even as this documentary, I think, fails to do, even as I would argue and debated with him in his lifetime, his political conclusions at the time, which were to support Barack Obama. This series absolutely concludes that we have to support Joe Biden, and in fact, as we'll get to, takes credit for Joe Biden's victory over Trump in 2020, and projects this as if this is some sort of power that we have. So my point is that instead of just, again, cherry picking Baraka in this way and dropping his name as some, again, allusion to something radical and powerful, it creates the illusion that what they have done is what, as they claim, is what Baraka was calling for. So when Baraka says later on, the so-called fine arts realizes that those of us who have freed ourselves, that our creations need not emulate the white man's, but it's time the engineers, architects, chemists, electronics, craftsmen, i.e. film, radio, sound, etc., and learn Western technology must not be the end of our understanding of the particular discipline we're involved in. It's not. It must not be the end of our understanding of the particular discipline we're involved in. So, in other words, I don't think that Black Twitter and this docuseries does that. In other words, I don't think it produces, the series or Black Twitter itself or this article does not advance our understanding beyond the simple use of the technology. It does not help us evolve our understanding of the role and relationship media are playing or play to us and what we play in terms of relationship to the political and broader economy. Baraka says a little bit later, but what is our spirit? What will it project? What machines will it produce? What will they achieve? What will be their morality? Check the different morality of the Chinese birthday celebration firecracker and the white boys bomb. Machines have the morality of their inventors. But again, there's no real investigation of that in this article or in the series. It's just a reference, and then they go on to claim that they've done the work that Baraka is talking about. And we'll come back to this, but as you see here, he's featured in the series, in the Hulu series. Andre Brock, his interview with us previously is already linked in the show description. And our differences, our difference in frame interpretation all plays out in this series. And what this article is basically just a back and forth of quick commentary, like a discussion of Black Twitter files, speaking largely in congratulatory ways about how Twitter allowed Black people to voice themselves and to interject and to comment, and it lays the basis for what we end up seeing in the series. So I'm just skipping through it very quickly because it's I'm going to come back to more of what is its content is basically in the series. But it's just this roundtable kind of discussion in print here. I just wanted to show what the initial article, the basis of this series was or is. A roundtable of again, Black users of Twitter who largely argue it does wonderful things for the expression, particularly at the time the article came out in 2021, as we'll get to, and as many of us know by now, that has since been challenged even farther. But okay. So almost immediately, the series sets it up as sort of, again, just what was said there in the article. Twitter exists as a platform. Black people start using it. This concept of Black Twitter emerges, and then it sort of sets it up as it was all good until Musk bought Twitter. Like everything was going well, and then Musk messed it all up. And the talking heads, whether it's Parham himself, I hope I'm saying his name right, the director of the author of that article, and then the director is Prentice Penny, and I think he's the narrative voice we end up hearing through most of the series. Jason Parham gets writing credit because it's his article we just showed as the basis of it. Then Prentice sort of builds on that, and then you see some of the talking heads: Kamal Bell, Jamel Hill, Jamila Lemieux, April Rain, are just some of the talking heads that you see. Andre Brock, as I mentioned, Dr. Meredith Clark, who I'll come back to, was there, and Dr. Brock and Dr. Clark are two that I've met in person, and again, I saw immediately where the political differences were and are. They come up here, and I will just say, I was supposed to have been in a critical race and media group with them. It just never really went anywhere. And it was clear that the political differences would mean I would be just not included, as opposed to, it's kind of honestly how I feel about the Scholars for Social Justice. I get invited to these spaces, and then when there's difference or disagreement, it's not built upon. It's not discussed or debated or considered. It's just sort of marginalized. And so I'll just leave that there. But that's basically so. But again, seeing Meredith Clark and Andre Brock in there, again, two people I've met and whose work I'm somewhat familiar with. Brock's a little bit more, but the having engaged and been in some emails and been for a while on the listserv. I guess I got removed at some point. There are just some differences, and they in approach, specifically around the value of these media spaces to Black people, and particularly Black struggle. So they Prentice Penny, you can hear, I think it's his voice, because sometimes you see the person on screen, and then sometimes there's an uncredited voice that I think we're supposed to be able to recognize and pick up, having seen them throughout the series. But sometimes the voice will just come up sort of unattributed over some visuals, and I'm not always entirely sure who is speaking at that moment. But somebody very quickly at the beginning says, quote, "Black Twitter changed society." And I immediately thought of, I'm going to bring it here. What I immediately thought of was what was in the conclusion. Oh boy. Of Joy James's book on Angela Davis. Because when they say in this series, Black Twitter changed the world, this is exactly what I thought of. The last lines of James's book on Davis. In the 1950s and 1960s, amidst the Second Civil War, to resist Black dishonor and death, a 15-year-old left her Southern Black family and culture to enroll in a private, progressive Manhattan high school. There, she was introduced and mesmerized by the Communist Manifesto. That Black girl memorized Marx and Engels' terse instruction that our endeavor is not to interpret the world, but to change it. A decade later, she would converse and align with global iconic revolutionaries and rebel intellectuals. Over 5 decades of civil and human rights advocacy, working within the contexts of elite academia, Hollywood, celebrity movement culture, publishing, media platforms, politicians, Angela Davis would both interpret and change the world. I remain convinced by my initial reading of that, which is that if you, especially in context of reading the entire book, what James is saying about Davis is someone took the idea that our role is to change the world from a revolutionary position and argument, but engaged change in not quite a revolutionary way, and in fact redefined what change means, so that change becomes more of what I'm talking about here, symbolic, an allusion to the to what has become an illusion of power, revolution, and change. So that the changing of the world is not the change we're meant to think it means. It's similar to my argument around buying power, that the term power in the phrase buying power does not mean power in the sense that we often think it means. It has a very specific meaning in that context. And the same thing I think happens here, where change becomes redefined along more liberal or neoliberal lines as opposed to truly revolutionary standards that we would all be holding in our heart of hearts. So it's a very slick, to me, it's a very slick way of presenting it, but that's how I heard it. Black Twitter changed society. Yeah, it changed it in a way that allows for the illusion to power to become power itself, to be rebranded as power itself in the mind's eye of many Black Twitter users and followers or adherents to this approach. That the ability to create memes and viral hashtags and is a substitute for actual radical movement building. So there's a section where they say Black Twitter is like the Soul Train line and the Cookout. Those Black spaces where Black people can be Black and have fun and if you don't get it, you don't get it. If you don't know, you don't know. But in my note here, it says exactly, it's a wonderful space where Black people can gather and have fun, make jokes, even say something profound, but it is not a radically organized political space and has not improved material conditions of Black people and has done nothing to diminish the rest of white Twitter or white right Twitter. So of course it is, yeah. But instead of properly politicizing the context of that claim that it's Black Twitter is the Soul Train line and the Cookout, this is what leads to some of the I think the political confusion later in the series, and that is inherent to this approach. That if Black people can have a Soul Train line and a Cookout, and Black parties and gatherings, that this is somehow in and of itself the kind of power that we actually need, and it's not. So then when it's announced in the series, and then I looked it up later, and you realize that the writer Prentice Penny of this series is, I'll just pull it up here, has his credits, and it's mentioned in the series, so to identify for us who he is. His credits include Girlfriends, the show Insecure, Happy Endings. What else was he listed? Scrubs, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it's not that he's not talented, it's that he's the expertise he's bringing to this project is writing pop cultural sitcoms. At least in multiple contexts, at least with those that, if not all of them, are Black containing or even produced products that target white audiences. Maybe Insecure is not that, but even, I mean, its success is based on its white audience base, not its Black audience base. So it felt like it makes sense to me that because this series is presented as something that is nominally Black, nominally proudly Black, but is I don't think targeting, if not Black people, is certainly not targeting Black politics in any, I think, meaningful way. So then we get references to Black Twitter's propulsion of Me Too, of Black Lives Matter, of Oscars So White. And these are described as a continuation of Amiri Baraka's Black Arts Movement, where again, technologies of ethos is mentioned, but there's no mention of materiality or Baraka's Marxism or his support for Obama, then later his criticism of Obama. And what I would argue is in that moment, with all due respect, Baraka's failure to see, he argued in our debate, and I'll put the link in the show description, you can see for yourself, hear for yourself. In our debate years ago, he argued that it was we who didn't understand the dialectics properly, and that we didn't understand that we needed to support Obama as a way to again propel the contradictions and make advances when the dialectic affords the possibility. I just don't see it that way. And I was told by a number of Marxist leftists at the time. One woman that I used to work with at the radio station at PFW, she said to me, when I was saying I can't get with this Obama thing, she said, your dialectics are broken. And I said, then let them be broken then. Because if Marx's analysis is if Marx's analysis correctly applied said we were supposed to support Obama, then I either do not understand Marx, which was the argument then, and my reading of his work and inspiration from his work is leading me into a wrong conclusion, or Marx himself was wrong. Because I reject, especially looking back, and I was never moved from this. I reject that supporting Obama was somehow an advance and a necessary step forward. So, and then they had the nerve. And then somebody's watching. Oh, I forgot. Somebody's watching this show because I'm not even playing. I'm not even playing when I say what I'm about to say. I know this is going to sound. I know how it's going to come across, but I'm not even playing when I say it. I believe that folks watch this show because in the middle of the Hulu joint they drop
message.
And I don't care what anybody tells me. You cannot convince me that I and we right here didn't repopularize that reference to Living Color from back 20, 30 years ago. And then they drop it in this Hulu series out of nowhere. I saw it. I said, stop playing with me. But they want my credit, taking credit. Okay, continuing on. Just so I said here's just another celebratory apolitical look at race, class, media, and politics with quotes and references like "Our voice matters" and that Twitter. Oh, my favorite line. One of my favorite lines that they said here: "It democratized access, so our voices could be heard." And again, leaving out as if no one else is using Twitter, as if the intelligence community, as Barrett Brown has been showing us, wasn't using Twitter, and it's referenced. It's weird, and I believe Brock is even the one saying it because I was brought into the work group that he was in and Meredith Clark was in through Sophia Umoja Noble and her work on algorithms of oppression. It was meeting her that brought me into the group with them. And they make reference to without referencing her, and she's not included in this. They make reference to passingly, and I think it's Brock doing it, that the algorithms are. I don't know if he used the word racist, but there's some reference to the algorithms manipulating and keeping our voices marginalized, and Black Twitter was a response to that. But that's not how I remember her work. I remember her work arguing that the anti-Blackness is baked in and is not something that can be circumvented by simply creating hashtags and some popular use of the platform. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know. But I'll put a link. I should have had them in there already. I'll link to Sophia's interviews with us as well. So you can hear those in addition to the one with Brock. Yeah, then they make the mention Obama's America, raw, authentic energy, avatar for transformation. Obama's campaign brought Black people to Twitter. So they were talking about how 2008, it was his campaign that brought Black people to Twitter, but they don't see this as something to be critical of. And they don't do as we've been doing, which is to be critical of how Obama used media, social media in particular, to project himself to Black people and others as some sort of revolutionary extension of Malcolm and Martin and all of that. So they don't see this as something that is used. This series doesn't see something that is used to capture Black audiences and black voters, and as a mechanism, as a counterinsurgency mechanism of suppressing dissent. That's not the critique here. The argument from their point of view is that Obama is to be, his presence and success is to be credited to black people, and in part black Twitter. And again, this is where I think they're missing the point politically. So when they go on to say, right, they felt a sense, one of the pundits says that they felt a need to protect Obama from the racism he was suffering by using black Twitter. And then there's this left floating notion that that was somehow successful, that black Twitter protected Obama, or that he's, of course, worthy of protection. Then I wrote in my notes, this one, I rest my case on this one. In episode 1 of 3, they, in episode 1 of 3, they say the line for me that I said, I rest my case on this one here. This shows the, and I gotta have this. I gotta share. They said, quote, Paula Dean's demise was the greatest day of black Twitter. Now that's where you have an appropriate
message.
That's an appropriate use of message. When the Hulu documentary argues that Paula Dean's demise was the greatest day, quote, the greatest day of black Twitter. That says everything about my point about the politics of these series. What are you talking about? So again, as we recount all the time, all the material indicators of the suffering of black people, all the realities, all the lived experience, all the immaterial abuse black people suffer in media, et cetera, and so forth. And black Twitter's greatest moment is watching Paula Dean get called out, because they said throughout this series, black Twitter brings the receipts. As if at no other point in history have black people ever been able to produce research that exposes the realities of black condition. Not until black Twitter. And the height of that moment is when Paula Dean gets it. I said, you know, I rest my case. And that's just part 1. I already was done. They go on to say, to talk about the wonders of the show Scandal and how that created another moment for black Twitter. And Dr. Meredith Clark is quoted as saying it was a new era of black media. Now this part is never really clarified. I wrote, meaning what? New black celebrity? Because her point is she's never allowed to expand on camera, at least that we see her point there. But what do you mean a new era of black media? She and I were supposed to be in a breakout work group together. It didn't go anywhere. I always suspected it was in part because of these underlying tensions politically, these differences politically, where we would have these discussions, or one extended discussion and then a couple in person and then a few emails, where it was polite and respectful, but it was this, for me, a tension of, you all keep wanting to talk about all that black use of media and social media in particular has done well for black people. And I keep wanting to say that the exact opposite. That is the fundamental, that the dominance of media, the imposition of media for me is coming out of its actual origins from militarized intelligence, the cyber industrial complex, as Barrett Brown calls it. It is not here to enhance space for black voices or anyone else's to be heard. So, and then the material opposite, the material conclusion, or the logical conclusion looked for materially doesn't appear. In other words, if there is all of this power and new era and change, where is the material relationship there? Black people still being reported to be making 15 cents on the dollars. I was, again, at the Capital Matters conference I was just at a couple weeks ago. Black wealth headed to zero by 2050. What? I mean, we could. I mean, whatever. Pick the others. Whatever other statistic. Haven't police already killed more people overall this year? I don't, my point is, where's the material version of that? So that was always and you can see in this series, that's the argument. The defining movement of our time, it was said. Now we can immediately, again, part of the argument, now with Black Twitter, we get immediate information about police brutality. And then when they talk about, then they do something that I think is very slick and actually kind of pernicious, and actually, I have a more hostile feeling toward it. I think it's just bad what they do here in this series, because what they end up doing is, to make their point that Black Twitter has had this meaningful, powerful impact, they target moments like Trayvon Martin's killing, like Michael Brown's killing. They become as I wrote here, the stories are reported as mere backdrops to the bigger story that this series wants us to have, to take away, that Black Twitter is some powerful force. And then they have to immediately acknowledge and kind of repeatedly come back to, and later get a little bit more into, the fact that it's not even named Twitter anymore. And they even, spoiler alert, they even acknowledge by the end of the third episode that they're really reflecting on a moment that was great but is now gone, because Musk has destroyed Black Twitter by name officially, and the reality of the space doesn't even exist anymore. So what new era were we talking about? What is new here? Black people always create out of the spaces made available to them. That created space does not automatically translate into radical political movements. It does not automatically mean some advance. And again, by the way, our political enemies are also using these spaces. So there's no discussion of Twitter's role or media's role in perpetuating police violence, justifying it, being a space where police get their stories out too. So then they go into part two. Black Twitter went from promoting Obama to being a voice for reminding us that he changed nothing, because they have to do that. They know that you're watching this having lived through 8 years of Obama and your life didn't change. They know theirs didn't. They know that the immediate aftermath was Trump. So then they bring back again the spirit of Amiri Baraka, where they say was tweeted in Ferguson. And I wrote, really? Quote, learning Western technology must not be, and that's why I quoted learning, I brought back the quote from Baraka from his actual text, which they don't bring in. Learning Western technology must not be the end of our understanding of the particular discipline we're involved in. They seem to have not gotten that point from Baraka. And again, this isolating him, someone with that long of a career, with the amount of political change that he went through, without engaging any of that, to freeze him in this moment of the Black Arts Movement, and to pick this particular poem as opposed to any of the others, is very suspicious to me. It's telling, rather, to me even. So Black Lives Matter. So oh, that's I skipped. That's may not have flowed as. So they have to remind us nothing changed. Trump gets elected, and then here comes reference to Alicia Garza and Black Lives Matter, and they remind us of her tweeting Black Lives Matter, and then they do exactly what we rail against here on this platform by describing Black Lives Matter as, quote, Black Power. And that's when they say this point about Amiri Baraka. It was in the spirit of Amiri Baraka that we tweeted regarding Ferguson. And that's why I'm saying I don't feel like they followed through on what Baraka was saying, or what may have also been, all due respect, some of the shortcomings of this approach. Because I don't agree that Obama was some sort of culmination of some progressive or radical advance that Trump was there then to negate. As I said, and again, few of us were saying that something worse is going to come after Obama. So in many ways, we predicted a Trump. So then they go to who they really kind of want to hold up as the anti-Musk good white liberal, and they start sort of praising Jack Dorsey a little bit, one of the founders of the original Twitter. And I wrote here that he's raised up as being about the freedom because Musk is the singular enemy now. But nothing, of course, about his absurd blockchain savior efforts with Jay-Z, nothing about him walking off with billions of dollars, nothing about him being unable to stop the sale of his beloved Twitter and our beloved Black Twitter to Musk. None of that. Then they mention, we reference to Emmett Till and Nope and Black Panther as films that are telling the Black story and propelled through Black Twitter. Talking about Jack Dorsey's global cultural rep. I forgot her name, but she's on there. The Black woman that was the sort of the global cultural rep of Twitter, and it almost starts to become a. You can because you have New York Times writers, you got a lot of Black Twitter or former Black Twitter employees, and the Black heads of certain operations within Twitter are all the talking heads in this piece. So of course there's this glorifying of Twitter and of Jack Dorsey himself. And then they simply say that Trump's rise, they actually say this, that Trump's rise to power was actually a response to and a backlash to the propulsion of Black voices largely through Black Twitter. That's the analysis of the series, that Trump's rise was a response to the Black voices. It's a very limited and narrow and sophomoric even analysis of the rise of Trump and the role media played in that. So for instance, they don't talk about what we've talked a little bit about here, the Meme Wars book and the white rights use of social media. They don't get into any of the Cambridge Analytica. They don't get into any of that kind of stuff. It was just simply white people were upset with all this Black tweeting, and then they elected Trump. So then they quickly turned back to another glorified moment where Black Twitter called out the Karens, and they have a moment of a Mount Rushmore of the history of Karens, and the propulsion of Black boy joy and Black girl magic. Again, where's the material component to any of that? Not really important. And then I wrote here, they talk of Twitter and access to media in the way cryptogandists talk about new access to new fintech and currency, but then immediately have to acknowledge the contradiction of bad information spreading and a need for government policy. So there is this moment right there in the series where they point out that this is this new media technology. And unlike previous communicative networks or forms, Black people have access to this one, and we can, and it sounded a lot like, that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is new money and we have access to it, unlike that old money. So we got to get involved with blockchain and fintech and get our Satoshis and all of that. So we can, it had that kind of sound, but then they have to quickly come back, much like the cryptogandists have to do, and come back and acknowledge that they needed policy. Government needed to intervene in managing not only the I think they were talking about even the sale of Twitter, but particularly the content policy, the policy of monitoring what was said needed government intervention. Much like all, whether it's cryptocurrency or anything else, everybody understands on some level this you need public policy. You need government protection, whether you are exploiting workers through a capitalist economy, or whether you're trying to redistribute wealth through a socialist one. You need government policy to play a role here. So they even acknowledge that in passing without making the point the way that I think it should be made, because the overall message here is that when Black people engage a space like Twitter, revolution happens. Because then they go into, speaking of government policy, they talk about how 2020 was evidence. When Biden and Harris got elected, this was seen as, quote, Black power. Quote, Black Twitter was feeling itself. We went from picking cotton to picking presidents. And then they have a whole few minutes at the end of part 3 praising Black Twitter for bringing us Biden and Harris. So you know what they're saying we need to be doing now in 2024. And you could see why this would be produced in 2024 in advance of an election where we gotta get out there and get Biden back again. They do have to mention January 6th because they always have to acknowledge that it's like the series is forced to contradict itself. We got Obama, but then nothing really happened, because then we had to have Black Lives Matter and the police violence. We got Biden and Harris, but then we didn't really work, because then we got January 6th. And white folks went crazy. But we can quickly skip past that, because we got to have a section where we get into Hotep Twitter and toxic Black masculinity. So again, as I said at the beginning, the idea that we're getting a people's history of Black Twitter or of Twitter is misplaced here. It's falsely imposed, because we're not getting anything new. We're not getting a people's history in the way that Zinn gave us a people's history of the United States, or Dunbar Ortiz gives us a people's history of indigenous people. We're given in this sense, under the label of a people's history, we're given the very standard white, conservative, narrow view of history. So Black radicalism and hotepery and African cultural appreciation or consciousness is reduced to toxic Black masculinity. We're not given an exploration, for instance, of the history of even the word hotep, or why Afrocentricity would be important to African people in the so-called New World. We're not given any of the critique that would come from the actual left of the cartoonish approach by some online to Black radicalism, easily reduced and diminished under the label Hotep. We're not given any of that. We just get the very easy, containable, narrow, it's just toxic. And we get the one of the few clips that we get is Kevin Samuels talking about how Black men should be addressing themselves to women. So no reference to actual Black radicals or how actual Black radicals use Black Twitter. We get Kevin Samuels to represent all of the hotepery. So even the underlying rational arguments of the so-called Hotep community are ignored. So that's what I'm saying that these series do. But it's presented through all of these beautiful and talented Black people, so it appears as though this is something else. And then, yeah, it says because Black Twitter has the receipts, as if this is some new radical reservoir of knowledge. And then it concludes with Elon Musk as the new enemy who took all their jobs, because that's ultimately what a lot of the people were talking, like the people who lost their jobs when Elon Musk took over. And then they even have to acknowledge that it isn't even Twitter anymore. So the very end has some history and analysis. They have one brother on there at the end who has a little bit of history and analysis in terms of how media have always been hostile to Blackness and Black people, and how they're always pushing brands, and but it's just one person and one little thing, but even that bit of analysis has no real political framing. So that way they can conclude that pushing brands and movements is the same thing. And they literally do that. There's right after this brother says a couple things that are almost pointing to some actual usable analysis. We get immediately, all of that is subsumed beneath, again, we don't see her. I don't know exactly who is speaking, but we hear a woman's voice over a montage of I think Coca-Cola and McDonald's brands, and then you see people protesting, and it's this idea that, and she literally says that we can move brands and movements. We can push brands and movements. So she's equating marketing with movements, which is very much what I think we're encouraged to see these days. Movements as being branded, supported, marketable products that target ultimately affluent white audiences. Because so much of what these people were talking about, the talking heads in this were talking about, was the ability to influence national discussion, that is white, to get themselves referenced in bigger white platforms, to impact the national political scene. But not in any organized or radical way. It's just to have some sort of recognition, some sort of inclusion, to be hired by these platforms, to work for these platforms, and to claim, to fall into the trap of claiming that they're doing more than they're actually doing, because sometimes we feel good doing it. So I'll just stop here by restating my initial thesis, that this is just another in an increasing barrage of documentaries and films which intend to replace actual power, political struggle, radical movement building with presentation, symbolic reference, popularity, and bourgeois fantasies of inclusion and national influence. The political context of media, its function, its maintenance of power, the actual material conditions of Black people, or the political economy of Blackness is all ignored in favor of allusions which create illusions of a power we are still lacking. All right, that's my
Message.
So I'm going to take a very quick break, and then I'll come back and check if there's any comments, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, consternation, contemplation, condemnation, confrontation, consternation, collaboration. So don't go anywhere. Back right here in just a quick second.
You got to earn your liberation.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right. So definitely, again, Friday, May 19th, come on out and see Earn Your Liberation and the crew at Nomu Nomu in Baltimore. The link to that I'll make sure is in the show description as well. Are there any comments, questions? Yeah, I mean, that's another good point, by the way. Kevin Samuels isn't even a Hotep. I mean, they're just conflating. That's a really good point. No, you're welcome. You're welcome, John. That's what I'm here to do, to save you your time. Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. Um, oh, this is funny. Jab is right that people are watching. Jokic just balling with some fury all of a sudden. Uh-oh. I joined Twitter in 2011. Uh, yep, 2011. By the way, that Jokic line. So our football crew. I want to read. I was up almost all night last night for whatever reason, and early this morning, our little soccer football crew had a continuing our exchange, and I did write something in response that I actually kind of like. I don't usually, so I'm just going to see if it holds up in the light of day here. Because I was asked, let me see if I could show it without. I don't want to expose the whole thing. But Brother Mutanda was asking me, well, what do you mean by its political economy? Because I was talking about, again, I'm not interested as much in the aesthetic in the end result as I am in some of the aesthetics and some of the politics, and I'm not even as much interested in the sport as I sometimes convey. But I just said here that so when I was asked, so what do I mean by the political economy of the sport? And I said that the way it exploits labor and protects existing structures of power. For instance, the reason I love the OJ Made in America series is how it does a great job of laying out how important USC football is to whiteness, the financial economy, but also the economy of immaterial ideas, symbols, messages. In this way, Erling Haaland's style of play for me mimics the direct brute strength of Empire, its effective erasure of beauty, the stormtroopers, the perfect Aryan that is wildly ugly to me, just stomping and trampling over the colonies, standing astride as if Cecil Rhodes saying he will, as if Cecil Rhodes saying he will rule all of Africa from the Cape to Cairo, so that he can somehow, Haaland can somehow still be elite in accomplishing the brash goal pun of the game makes it all worse for me. He exposes the fundamental imperialism in the game and the global professional structure. I sit away from other parents and do not speak to coaches because by the end of the game I'm thinking of nothing but combat when all my daughter has been doing is playing a game. And that's actually my truest feelings about it. Like I don't love the game for the same reasons I think other people love the game. And it almost feels akin to what I'm saying about this whole thing here. I don't love that's where I kind of go. And I reached out to Armand Towns to see if he could do another interview about his black media philosophy and his work with his how he interprets McLuhan, because I kind of feel the same thing here. I don't care, or I care less about what we all do on Twitter than the fact that we're using Twitter in the first place. And that what that says about everything in terms of who owns it, how it's manipulated, how it relegates us, how it promotes versus suppresses. So whether I can come up with the great tweet or someone else can come up with the great tweet is irrelevant to the fact that we're using Twitter in the first place. And then we impose or project or encourage to project all of this hope and power onto the platform that doesn't exist. I don't know, don't I? How would I not follow Big Pun? Mm-hmm. Jamel Hill got the description of Shea Butter Twitter all wrong. Shea Butter Twitter was used to disparage black feminists. There was even a Shea Butter Twitter list circulated with women to interact. I don't remember. Did she say that in this series? I don't remember that part, and I don't know enough of that story. But yeah. I mean, listen. Hotep Twitter was a response to that. Oh, really? Okay. I don't know. She says shea butter Twitter meant woke, too woke to have fun. I don't know. I mean, Rob is correct. Okay. Rob is correct. Yeah, I don't know. But again, well, that if that error would make sense, because there was no interest in this series in offering any room to any value to what is dismissed as hotepery. But yeah, I think I forgot whose comment that was, but the point is exactly right. To reduce hotep to Kevin Samuels is wild. It's the same delusion regarding TikTok where things are being projected onto it and the attempts to ban hadn't curtailed those delusions. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. That makes sense. So, but okay. If there's no something specific, I will dip out and I think tonight Geechee and I are joining Diallo's show on his platform. I'm not sure if anything is coming up today on ours. And but make sure you have the bell rung. Please do support our Patreon since we're not monetized as a channel. But I think in general we want people to move over to Patreon anyway. So if you could support the Patreon, it's in the show description. Please do. And otherwise, at least just like, share, and continue to subscribe to the platform. At the end of the day, generating revenue is helpful and can benefit some projects, but that's not the ultimate goal of the platform. So being demonetized is, I mean, but exactly. They don't know what hotep means. Exactly. James, you're exactly right. But but I might even be a little more cynical than that at this point. I'm not even so sure that they're not aware of what it could mean. I think that there is a happiness or a willingness to participate in suppressing anything left of the Democratic Party. Because at the end of the day, most of the people we saw as talking heads in this series, and from the, one of the people there was literally somebody who had been on Obama's in his administration. So it's where Obama's presence is considered the sort of the height, the pinnacle of Black Twitterness. So there is this. I just think that I think some don't know what hotep and the whatever that could be, or the breadth of Afrocentricity or even Black radical traditions. But I think there is I do think there is a conscious willingness to participate in anything left of voting for Biden. That's all hotep. Because it's not even, and it's not to say that the toxic masculinity is acceptable, but it is to say that the critique of it doesn't even include anything more broadly political. So it's almost as if to say, if Kevin Samuels did everything else and only stopped what was his sort of hostile, if not worse, relationship with women, or projection of a kind of relationship to women, that he would have been okay. That everything else about his politics would have been okay. And that's sort of the point, so everything else about the business and the investment or claims, all those other kind of stuff, like, that's not the problem. It's only the fact that he had his hostilities towards women, which is bad enough, but that's, again, I think missing many of the points there. There was one brief moment just before the Hotep part where there's a discussion of Black Twitter's value to the LGBTQIA community. But I struggle with the same kind of, where does that manifest materially? And is that in fact borne out by data? I actually did I didn't read any of them, but I did a relatively quick search last night or early this morning, and just for papers published in 2024, according to the titles and abstracts, there's a lot of debate and argument around is representation in social media net positive? In other words, there's a lot of hostility there too. And the only time that's really brought up was in that brief section around the LGBTQ community, that they experience a lot of hostility on these platforms, but it's not taken again to its logical conclusion. Well, why is that? And then why is there still racism there? And and now that Musk has returned or taken over, how is this space a protective space? And obviously it's not. So if it wasn't that protected previously, and it's not a protective space now, then doesn't that speak to whatever the potential could have been in that space for a radical use of the space? And that goes back up to my point about Armand Towns and Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. Meaning, again, that it doesn't matter it matters less how we use the medium, and it says, and more is said about society that we are using that medium. And I really do struggle with, but either way, my point would be, whether it's McLuhan's form of the argument or my preferred form, which is the focus on content, the point would still be that for whatever good we can do in our tweets, the enemy is doing their own, and they're often more organized and well-funded. And it's and of course, again, what goes unmentioned in this series is that social media and the internet and the digital media environment itself is itself part of a militarized counterinsurgency psychological warfare effort. But to the point I'm trying to make about what they leave out from Baraka's analysis around technology and ethos is, what are we doing with the medium, and what can be done with the medium? And if the extent to which our use of the medium is that we create this Soul Train line effect, where we have an all-Black space where we feel good, but it is itself not radically politicized, then we need to at least acknowledge that's what it is, and stop adding that political point to it. It should have just been sort of, Black Twitter is the Soul Train line. Black Twitter is the cookout. It's great. We can have fun. We can even have this sense of, it's a false sense, just like in real life, a false sense of isolation, security, independence. But the reality is, whenever they need to, whether it's the police in real life or some other form of surveillance or hostility or white vigilantism, or just the regular violence of the economy, or whether it's Musk coming in and buying up the space and firing everybody, we're not safe here. We're not free. We're not liberated. It's not, there's been no advance made per se. So, and then I don't even know, it seemed like it could be at least half of the people on this thing were fired and living off of some sort of severance package, maybe, I don't know, or rehired somewhere else. But the point is that, all right. A-Rob and Ricky gonna be doing a what are you doing? You doing a people's history of what together? Where were you? Where what did I miss? Where were you all at? That was this was happening. Hotep was being used as a slur to reference reactionary cultural nationalists, which most likely intentional. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Who did? I'm now just watching. I'm lost in the chat. Okay, I'm gonna dip out of here. Listen, thanks again, everybody, for coming through. Really appreciate you. Do all the things, and come on out on Sunday, May 19th. Link and all that will be in the show description for details on EYL in Baltimore. And other than that, I will see you next time here on.
I mix what I like, I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like, organic, vegan, soul food from your media diet. That's healthy.